I never thought a simple question could unravel everything I'd been carefully keeping hidden for 2 years. But there I was, sitting on our worn leather couch at 2 in the morning, rain drumming against the windows of our tiny apartment, when Marcus asked me if I'd ever been in love. And when I looked up at him, really looked at him, the silence that followed said everything I'd been too afraid to speak out loud. Let me back up, because this story doesn't start there. It starts 6 months earlier, on a sweltering August afternoon, when I helped Marcus move his boxes into the second bedroom of the apartment I could barely afford on my own. He was a friend of a friend, someone I'd met exactly once at a barbecue, and I was desperate enough for a roommate that I didn't really care that we were essentially strangers. He showed up in a faded university t-shirt, athletic shorts, and a smile that made my stomach do this uncomfortable flip that I immediately tried to ignore. Marcus was the kind of guy who seemed to take up space without trying. Not in an obnoxious way, but in this magnetic, effortless way that made you want to be in whatever room he was in. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair that was always slightly too long, and these green eyes that seemed to actually see you when he talked to you. He played recreational soccer on weekends, worked in digital marketing during the week, and had this laugh that started low and built into something infectious and unguarded. I told myself from day one that nothing could happen. Marcus was straight. He talked about his ex-girlfriend sometimes, a relationship that had ended badly about a year before we moved in together. He'd mention women he found attractive, ask my opinion on dating app profiles, all the usual straight guy stuff. And I was fine with that. I'd gotten good at being fine with things. I'd been out since college, had dated here and there, nothing serious. I knew how to keep my feelings compartmentalized, professional, friendly, but distant. Except Marcus made that impossible. Not because he did anything wrong, but because he was so genuinely, disarmingly kind. He remembered that I took my coffee with oat milk and always picked some up when he went shopping. He'd text me during the day to ask if I wanted him to grab dinner on his way home. When I had a terrible day at work, he'd queue up episodes of whatever show we were binge-watching and have beer waiting in the fridge. He treated our apartment like a home, not just a place to sleep, and he treated me like a friend, not just someone who helped pay the rent. The thing about living with someone is that you see them in all these unguarded moments. I saw Marcus first thing in the morning, hair sticking up, voice rough with sleep, padding into the kitchen in sweatpants and nothing else. I saw him stressed about work presentations, practicing in the living room while I pretended to read. I saw him after soccer games, sweaty and energized, talking a mile a minute about some play or goal. I saw him on lazy Sunday mornings, sprawled on the couch with a book, completely absorbed and peaceful. And somewhere in those months, somewhere between September and December, I fell in love with him. Not the sudden, dramatic kind of love you see in movies, but the slow, creeping kind that sneaks up on you. The kind where you realize one day that the best part of your day is hearing his key in the lock, where you find yourself making excuses to stay in the living room longer just to talk to him, where you catch yourself staring at the way his hands move when he talks, or the way his eyes crinkle when he's really laughing, not just being polite. I knew it was hopeless. I knew it was the kind of thing that could ruin everything we'd built. So I kept it locked down, buried deep, told myself it was just proximity and loneliness and that it would fade. But feelings like that don't fade when you see the person every single day. They grow roots. They become part of your foundation. December was hard. Marcus's company had their holiday party, and he brought back this woman named Sarah. She was beautiful, funny, exactly the kind of person he should be with. They sat on our couch, the same couch where Marcus and I had watched countless movies, and I made polite conversation for exactly as long as I could stand it before excusing myself to my room. I lay there in the dark, listening to their muffled laughter through the wall, feeling pathetic and angry at myself for feeling pathetic. Nothing happened with Sarah. Marcus told me a few days later that there wasn't really a spark, that she was nice, but it felt forced. I made sympathetic noises and hated how relieved I felt. He started going on more dates after that, meeting people from apps, and each time he left the apartment dressed up and smelling like cologne, I felt this hollow ache in my chest that I couldn't name to anyone, least of all him. But here's the thing that made it all so much harder. Marcus was physical in this casual, thoughtless way that straight guys sometimes are with their friends. He'd clap me on the shoulder or shove me playfully when I made a joke at his expense, or we'd end up sitting close on the couch during movies because our apartment was small and the couch wasn't that big. Once, during a particularly intense thriller, he grabbed my arm during a jump scare and then laughed at both of us for being startled. His hand stayed there for a moment, warm through my sleeve, and I stopped breathing until he let go. I started volunteering for more overtime at work, started saying yes to every social invitation from other friends, anything to be out of the apartment more. I thought distance would help, that maybe if I saw him less, the feelings would shrink back down to something manageable. But coming home to find him cooking dinner or watching TV or just existing in our shared space always hit me like a wave. There was no distance that could fix what I was feeling. January was brutal. The holidays had passed and the city was locked in that gray, cold period where spring feels impossible. I was tired all the time, from work and from the constant emotional effort of pretending everything was fine. Marcus noticed. Of course he noticed. He asked if I was okay one evening when we were both home, actually home at the same time for once, and I made some excuse about work stress and a friend having problems. He didn't push, but he started being around more, making a point to have dinner with me, suggesting we watch movies like we used to, just generally being present in this way that was both wonderful and torture. It was like he could sense something was wrong but couldn't figure out what, and his solution was to be an even better friend, which was exactly what I didn't need and exactly what I craved in equal measure. February brought a cold snap that left ice on the windows and made our heating system work overtime. I remember one Saturday afternoon, both of us stuck inside because it was legitimately dangerous to go out, and we ended up having this long, meandering conversation about life and plans and dreams. Marcus talked about maybe going back to school, about feeling stuck in his career. I talked about my family, about coming out, about how some relationships never quite recovered from that. He listened in that intense way he had, asking questions that showed he was really thinking about what I was saying. Then he said something that stuck with me. He said he admired how brave I was, how hard it must have been to be honest about who I was when it cost me things. I laughed it off, said it wasn't that brave. It was just necessary. But he shook his head and insisted. Said he thought a lot of people go through life never being honest about the important things, and that took more courage than most people had. I wanted to tell him right then that I was being a coward about the most important thing in my life right now, that I was lying by omission every single day. But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. March arrived with the first hints of spring, and with it, a shift. Marcus broke up with someone he'd been seeing casually for a few weeks. I didn't even know it was serious enough to call a breakup, but he seemed genuinely down about it. We were in the kitchen, and he was making pasta, and he just said it out of nowhere, that he'd ended things, that it felt like he was going through the motions with dating, that nothing felt right. I asked him what he meant, and he struggled to explain it. Said he felt like he was checking boxes, like he was supposed to feel certain things, and he just didn't. Said maybe he was still hung up on his ex, or maybe he was just broken in some way. I told him he wasn't broken, that sometimes it takes time to find the right person. The irony of me giving him dating advice wasn't lost on me. But something changed after that conversation. Marcus stopped going on dates. He started spending more time at home, and not in a depressed way, but in this settled, comfortable way. We fell into new routines, cooking together more often, actually planning meals instead of just fending for ourselves, having coffee together in the mornings before work instead of grabbing it on the go, watching entire series together, debating plot points and character motivations late into the night. It felt domestic in a way that made my heart hurt. Like we were playing house, except only I knew we were playing. To him, this was just what good roommates did, close friends. I kept telling myself that, kept trying to maintain that boundary in my head even as the physical boundaries kept shrinking. We'd sit closer on the couch. He'd fall asleep during movies, his head sometimes ending up on my shoulder. Once, I fell asleep too, and I woke up to find we'd somehow ended up with his arm around me, and I stayed frozen there for 20 minutes, barely breathing, until he shifted and woke up. He didn't make it weird, just stretched and yawned and made some joke about us both being old men who couldn't stay awake for a whole movie. But I saw something flicker across his face, too quick to read before the joke. Something that might have been confusion or realization or nothing at all. April brought warmer weather and with it, more of Marcus's friends coming over. I'd met most of them before, nice enough people. But there was this one night when his buddy Tyler made some casual comment about us being like a married couple. It was a joke, clearly, the kind of thing people say about roommates who get along well. Everyone laughed. Marcus laughed. But I saw him glance at me, and there was something in that look I couldn't decipher. After everyone left, we cleaned up in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was weighted. Marcus kept starting to say something and then stopping. Finally, while we were loading the dishwasher, he asked if Tyler's comment had bothered me. I said no, that people make jokes like that. He nodded but didn't seem satisfied with that answer, asked if I ever got tired of it, of people assuming things or making assumptions about me. I told him the truth, that I'd gotten used to it, that being gay meant people were always going to make assumptions, and you either let it eat you alive or you developed a thick skin. He was quiet for a long moment, then said he couldn't imagine having to do that, having to constantly manage other people's perceptions just to exist. There was something in his voice, something almost sad, and I wanted to ask him what he was really thinking, but I didn't. May was when things started to feel different in a way I couldn't ignore. Marcus became more tactile, more present, more something I didn't have a word for. He'd touch my back when he passed behind me in the kitchen. He'd sit close enough that our knees touched. He started asking me more personal questions about past relationships, about what I wanted in a partner, about whether I'd ever been in love before. That last question came up one evening in mid-May. We were on the balcony, small as it was, sharing a beer and watching the sunset turn the city orange and pink. He asked it casually, like he was asking about the weather, but I felt the weight of it. I deflected, asked him the same question. He said he thought he had been with his ex, but now he wasn't sure. That maybe what he'd felt was just comfort and familiarity, not actual love. I asked him what he thought the difference was, and he thought about it for a long time. Finally said he thought real love was when someone became essential, not just nice to have around. When the thought of them not being in your life felt like losing a limb. When you wanted to tell them every stupid little thing that happened during your day. When just sitting in silence with them felt like enough. My throat felt tight. I made some non-committal noise of agreement. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and asked again, had I ever felt that way about someone? I said yes once, left it at that. He didn't push, but I felt his eyes on me for a long time after. The tension built through late May and into June. Or maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I wanted there to be tension so badly that I was creating it out of nothing. Marcus seemed distracted, quieter than usual. He'd catch me looking at him sometimes and hold my gaze just a beat too long before one of us looked away. We'd reach for the same thing in the kitchen and our hands would touch and neither of us would move for a second. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind, started to question every interaction, every look, every moment of casual physical contact. Was I reading into things that weren't there? Was this wishful thinking taken to a delusional extreme? I couldn't tell anymore. The line between reality and what I wanted reality to be had blurred beyond recognition. Then came that night in late June, the night everything changed. We'd both had long days at work. I got home first and ordered Thai food, Marcus's favorite, because I knew he'd had a particularly brutal week. He came home looking exhausted, but his face lit up when he saw the food containers on the counter. We ate and talked about nothing important, just decompressing, letting the stress of the week drain away. After dinner, we ended up on the couch with beers, no TV on, just talking. The conversation wandered from work to friends to family to childhood memories. It was easy and comfortable, the kind of conversation where hours pass without you noticing. The rain started around 11, a steady drumming that made the apartment feel even cozier, more cut off from the rest of the world. Around 2 a.m, we were both still wide awake, that overtired state where everything feels slightly unreal and your defenses are down. Marcus had been quiet for a while, just listening to the rain, and then he turned to me and asked it, "Have you ever been in love?" Not had I ever been in love, past tense, like on the balcony. Have you ever been in love? Present tense, like he was asking about now, about currently, about this moment. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the way his hair was messy from running his hands through it all night, at the stubble on his jaw because he'd been too tired to shave that morning. At his eyes, those green eyes that had become so familiar and so dangerous to me. At the slight furrow between his brows, like he was worried about what I might say. And I couldn't speak. The truth was right there, pressing against my teeth, demanding to be let out. Yes, I wanted to say. Yes, I'm in love with you. Have been for months. It's eating me alive and I can't do anything about it because you're my roommate and my friend and straight and this would ruin everything. But I couldn't say any of that. So I just looked at him, and the silence stretched between us, heavy and charged and full of everything I couldn't say. And I watched his face change, watched realization or understanding or something dawn in his eyes, watched his breath catch, just slightly. He didn't look away. I thought he would, thought this would be the moment where he'd make a joke or change the subject or do something to break the tension. But he didn't. He just held my gaze, and I saw his throat work as he swallowed, saw his hand tighten around his beer bottle, saw the same fear I was feeling reflected back at me. The rain got louder, or maybe it just felt that way in the silence. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. This was it. This was the moment where everything either broke or transformed into something else entirely. And I had no idea which way it was going to go. Marcus set down his beer bottle slowly, deliberately, not breaking eye contact. His hand shook slightly. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, closed it again. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said my name. Just my name. But the way he said it held a question, a confession, a plea all at once. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the weight of this moment, of 6 months of hidden feelings, crystallizing into something real and terrifying and impossible to take back. And I knew, whatever happened next, whatever words came after this silence, nothing would ever be the same between us again.